Nintendo sure knows how to pack as much adventure into their titles as possible. They have constantly innovated themselves and provided hours of entertainment throughout the years. We become attached to titles such as The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario Bros. An amazing adventure can be underwhelming, with an anticlimactic ending. So without further ado, here are 10 of the most useless Nintendo final bosses. But before we begin, hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with more amazing videos from the gamer. Number 10. King Boo, Luigi's Mansion. Luigi's Mansion was an absolute blast to play, and a rather quirky addition to the Mario Bros. Universe. It was a change from the platforming games we have become accustomed to. Much of Luigi's Mansion can be considered simplistic, because, come on, you're just sucking up ghosts in a vacuum cleaner. But there were some gameplay mechanics which helped to change the pace. If you do manage to ghost bust your way to the final chamber, you'll come face to face with this game's menacing final boss. It's very fitting King Boo would act as ringleader to the spooky specters of Luigi's Mansion, but the final showdown feels royally disappointing. Now, don't get us wrong. The final fight itself seems pretty epic. You're face to face with Bowser, well, King Boo in a Bowser suit, and it feels like you're taking on a truly powerful foe. There isn't much going on in terms of mechanics or difficulty. The King Boo fight is a rinse and repeat battle, which sees you sucking up a spiked ball and spitting it back towards the towering enemy. Once King Boo is vulnerable, you'll need to attack him with your handheld Dust Buster. As long as you keep moving, King Bowser Boo doesn't seem very threatening. Number 9. DEMISE. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. The Legend of Zelda series has a penchant for crafting bosses that feel a bit underwhelming. To be fair, these baddies are usually found wanting at the end of the first dungeon. This was not the case for The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, which features a rather mediocre final boss. Once you master the motion controls, you'll find yourself hacking and slashing your way through Skyward Sword's dungeons and enemies. The bosses you fight along the way will test your grit and wit, while simultaneously preparing you for the final epic showdown with the lead antagonist, DEMISE. To some, DEMISE seems like a tough cookie to crack, and it's important to note his difficulty does spike a bit when faced on hero mode. To a skilled Skyward Sword player, DEMISE is actually quite simple. During his first phase, you'll simply need to hold your shield up and wait for him to attack. This will give you a small window in which you can strike back. When he enters his second phase is when most players seem to have trouble. During this phase, DEMISE can hit rather hard, but he's pretty easy if you utilize the Skyward Strike. A few of these heavenly energy waves, and DEMISE is toast. Number 8. PARASITIS Core ABADOX. If the name ABADOX doesn't sound familiar, just think about the rage-inducing moments you had playing Gradius or Super R-Type. There should be tons of frustrating moments popping into your head right about now. Produced by Natsumi and released in 1990, ABADOX was another side and vertical scrolling shooter which featured a heavy, futuristic sci-fi theme. Unique visuals helped to set ABADOX apart from the crowd, but many critics complained the title was, you guessed it, too difficult. Like many side-scrolling shooters before it, ABADOX suffered from an unforgiving spike in difficulty, complete with annoying bosses and a one-hit-you-die style gameplay mechanic. The game itself wasn't very long, and it did feature some slightly helpful checkpoints. It's hard to understand why such a difficult game would make this list, but we have a good reason. The final boss, known as the PARASITIS Core, is mind-blowingly easy to defeat. Upon entering the room, you simply have to shoot this monstrosity in the eyes for a short period of time. That's it. It's dead. Game over. In fact, the escape screen, which takes place after this boss, is hundreds of times harder to complete. I guess it all balances out in the end. Number 7. YIN-YARN, Kirby's Epic Yarn. Let's be honest, Kirby's Epic Yarn isn't exactly overly challenging in the first place. It still deserves a spot on this list due to the glaringly simplistic second phase of the final boss. For those unfamiliar, Kirby's Epic Yarn was a bit of a twist for the franchise, turning the beloved pink puffball into, well, yarn. Rather than suck up enemies, Kirby was now capable of turning into various yarn-based objects, making use of a swinging whip to attack. Although it is important to note Kirby's whip is used to completely unravel an enemy or grapple onto anchor points, so it's nothing like Simon's from Castlevania. The final boss of this stringy story pulls out all the stops to topple our round hero. At the beginning of the fight, this dastardly boss will summon a yarn dragon. This imposing creature is easily defeated by tossing its slow-moving projectiles back at its face. The entire boss fight is quite simple, but the end phase is where things get really easy. Kirby will transform into a tank and allow you to endlessly fire an array of rockets at your enemy. You'll only have to tilt your aim slightly up and down to finish this battle. Number 6. King Edgar, Adventures of LOLO. This is too hilarious not to list. Adventures of Lolo was an adorable little puzzle game developed in 1989 by HAL Laboratory. Yes, the same HAL that makes all the Kirby games. Adventures of Lolo was part of the ongoing Eggerland franchise, which we hadn't seen statewide. The premise of the game was simple enough, involving a round-shaped protagonist named Lolo on a quest to save Princess Lala from the evil King Egger. From a gameplay standpoint, Adventures of Lolo is heavy on puzzle solving and light on everything else. The combat consisted of bubbling up enemies and pushing them off screen. There were also collectible items that would clear away all enemies in one fell swoop. This title was always meant to be a cute little brain teaser, but that doesn't excuse the blatantly awful boss battle at the end. It's not exactly fair to call it a boss battle, as there isn't much of a battle to experience. Once he clears the final room, Lolo will come face to face with the benevolent King Egger. In this moment, one would expect the screen to shake and a mind-blowing puzzle to unfurl. Instead, we see Lolo effortlessly blast King Egger off screen, and the credits begin to roll. Number 5. Scar, the Lion King. The Lion King wasn't exactly the easiest game. The second level was an annoyance, and those of you who bested those darn hippo tails and monkey puzzles were greeted with increasingly hard levels and enemies. After clawing your way to adulthood and braving the hyena-filled journey back to Pride Rock, you'll face Scar in a one-on-one battle for lion supremacy. The final stage acts like one large-scale moving boss fight. Your goal is to lead Simba to the top of Pride Rock, battling and pursuing Scar along the way. For the most part, a few swipes here and there, paired with a few dodges, are enough to send Scar running for his life. There are a few hyenas to battle, but nothing you aren't used to at this point in the game. The top of Pride Rock is where the real final battle begins. Backed into a corner, Scar will be forced to fight you. It's not too hard to avoid his attacks, and one particular mechanic makes this boss fight exceedingly simple. Once Scar is panting from exhaustion, Simba can grab him and send him flying overhead via a lion-style judo flip. If you're near the edge of the cliff, this flip will send Scar free-falling to his doom. Number 4. ALEC TREVELYAN, GOLDENEYE 007. There is arguably no first-person shooter more iconic on the Nintendo 64 than GOLDENEYE 007. This journey through the James Bond universe is filled with iconic levels, weapons, action, and a fancy Bond-esque wristwatch. Many hours of our youth were consumed by GoldenEye 007's awesome multiplayer modes. Bond's quest spans several locations and sees some pretty tough firefights, especially on harder difficulties. There are even some stealthy missions. We're looking at you, Bunker. Although stealth was entirely optional, and you'd usually find yourself running rampant through corridors with your guns blazing. Overall, GoldenEye 007 was a fun and challenging Nintendo 64 release, but the final level left a lot to be desired. When you finally catch up to ALEC TREVELYAN, you'll be forced to pursue him through a sky-high location called the Cradle. You've spent most of the game realizing what a terror Trevelyan really is, and how imposing he must be. In reality, or in this case virtual, the foe is nothing more than a scaredy cat who spends all of his time running away from Bond. After a while, Trevelyan makes his way down to a ridiculously small platform. A few gunshots later, and this big baddie is plummeting helplessly towards the earth. Number 3. Zera's Brain, Gradius. The end boss for Gradius plays out an awful lot like the one from Adventures of Lolo. The mighty Zera's Brain isn't so mighty when you finally meet it within its futuristic chamber. That being said, it's important to note that Gradius is a much harder game, belonging to the painfully difficult club of retro side-scrolling shooters. Seriously, is there even one side-scrolling shooter game from this era which isn't ridiculously difficult? Thankfully, this experience isn't nearly as unforgiving as Super R-Type or ABADOX. One hit will destroy your ship, but you can obtain a shield which will allow you to sustain 5 hits. Still, Gradius offers a nice difficulty curve and some interesting and annoying bosses to defeat. By the time you reach the final boss, you're prepared to withstand whatever the devious brain can throw at you. Unfortunately, you won't have the opportunity to survive much of anything. The Zera's Brain doesn't attack. It simply sits there for a moment before activating a self-destruct protocol. A welcome sight to some, as Gradius was difficult enough. However, there are those of us who expected more from the title's end boss, and were supremely disappointed when a final battle never commenced. Number 2. Bowser, Super Mario Bros. Finally, Bowser makes his long-awaited entrance onto this list. King Koopa, also known as the fire-breathing dragon turtle, has seen his fair share of hilariously embarrassing moments. Heck, he even killed himself in Super Mario Bros. 3. That particular fight is simple enough. But adding Bowser to this list multiple times just seemed unfair. Super Mario Bros. Can be decently challenging if you don't use the Speedy World warping pipes. It's short enough to finish in one sitting, but certain levels are a headache. The last level features a never-ending side-scrolling puzzle you'll need to decipher if you want to move on to the final boss. You'd think the final version of Bowser would be downright difficult in comparison to his early level flunkies. Sadly, he's not. This final fight features the same mechanic as the rest, with the added danger of a severe increase in projectiles. All you need to do is hop into the air and then run beneath Bowser to the glowing axe when he follows suit. If you manage to keep a Fire Flower power-up this far, you can defeat the King Koopa with a few projectiles. Talk about underwhelming. Number 1. Ganon, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Without a doubt, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was one of the best games to ever grace the franchise. Whether you pick this game up for the Nintendo 64 or snag the remake for the Nintendo 3DS, we can all agree Ocarina of Time is in a class all its own. This isn't your grandma's Legend of Zelda either. Ocarina of Time had grit, difficulty, and wonderful gameplay mechanics. Fights were sometimes arduous, and thoughtful puzzles helped to break up the monotony. The boss battles were plentiful and well-designed. It was a very satisfying game, and a pretty long journey for anyone hoping to visit every nook and cranny of Hyrule. It's for this reason the final battle with Ganondorf, now Ganon in this case, is so heartbreaking. After defeating the Dark Lord from inside his castle, you'll need to beat him one more time by throwing down against his grotesque-looking humanoid boar form. He may look imposing at first, but Ganon is no match for the hero of time. This battle is a complete rinse and repeat, allowing players to effortlessly roll through Ganon's legs as he raises his swords and attack the weak point on his tail. If you prefer things to be super disappointing, just bring some light arrows. Hopefully we didn't ruin your childhood by letting you know how mediocre your favorite boss fight was. Let us know about any underwhelming Nintendo bosses we may have missed in the comments section below. Also, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with our awesome videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Gamer.